Okay, you good? You good? No?
Put me on the spot.
Where's your list, bud? What's up, Kings of War fans? Utterly Spineless here, bringing you some more Kings of War action. Today we've got Abyssals against Orcs. We've got 1995 of Abyssals. Right, talk us through your list, Dan. What have you got, mate?
Unit of flame bearers.
Yep.
Naked. Horde of larvae. A troop of hellhounds. Horde of imps. Horde of tortured souls. Regiment of tortured souls.
Okay, big fan of the tortured souls. Nice, fearless flyers.
Troop of gargoyles.
Yep, nice flying chaff.
Regiment of abyssal horsemen. I think I've given them Pathfinder.
Nice.
And horde of lower abyssals. They've got crushing.
Okay, so two little hordes, nice.
Yeah, and then this guy is obviously
oh, who's this? Cronius. Nice.
Probably the last time you're going to see him until COP 19.
Okay.
I don't know, who knows. Then two Ifrits, one with piercing, this one here, and this one inspiring, and then a Harbinger with loot.
Okay, so we basically know that these guys are going to get nerfed going into Clash of Kings 2019.
Probably.
So the Ifrits, they're 5/20 at the moment. They're probably going to go down to, we think, about 16 based on the leaks that have come, don't we? But today we're playing them with the old rules, so this might be one of the last times you're going to play your disgusting little shooty fireball infinity
from
Abyssals.
Yeah, Leaky Cock 2019.
But you actually had quite a lot of success with this army. You went to a nice little one-dayer on the weekend. Do you want to talk us through what you did?
Drew 3, 1-1. One game, so not too bad.
So you're actually undefeated. Three draws and a win.
Yeah.
So you know your way around this army then, yeah?
You'd think so.
Okay, there we go. That is 1995. And here we have 1995 of the mighty Orcs. Let's just start from left to right. This is what we have. 2 regiments of great axes. I'm having a lot of success with these guys. I used to field more axes, but I'm finding the great axes they do the same thing, but they do it for 50 points cheaper, and the crushing 2 is nice. Then I've got a horde of axes. These have brew of strength, so these are also crushing 2. Then a horde of trolls, again crushing 2, so loads of crushing. To chaff all this infantry up, we just have 2 regiments of Orklings. Behind them we have 2 drums, and then cavalry-wise 2 regiments of Gore Riders. One of them has Pathfinder. And then hero choices, we have my brand new guy. This is my Crudger on a wing slasher. Never played with him before, I literally finished painting him yesterday. So this is his first outing, excited to see how he's done. I've never even played with this type of model before because I don't field a dragon with my Basilias and you don't have access to one of these in my goblins, so I've actually never played a flying dragon before. So pumped for this guy, making his debut, general in the army, whoop whoop! And then we've got my Crudger on a chariot. Old Faithful, love this guy, great model. He has Blade of Slashing, so he gets to re-roll and miss. Other than that, he's naked. And then we have a God Speaker on a Gore. This guy's got Inspiring Talisman and Veil of Shadows. Oh yeah, because I knew I was playing a dirty little Abyssal army, so I'll be giving myself some stealthy. And there we go. That makes up 1995 of Orcs.
Boom.
What is up, Kings of War fans? Utterly Spineless here, glad to bring you another Kings of War battle report before Christmas, and this will probably be the last one of the 2018 Clash of Kings before lots of changes are made in 2019. So we're playing Control Scenario, which is the one where the table is split into 6 even parts, and you get victory points for scoring them at the end. And we are playing the 1995 points cost because it brings it under the 2,000 points threshold, which means you can only get 2 of each drop, so you can't spam 3 heroes or war machines. So he couldn't take 3 Afrits, for example, he has to take 2. It's a points cost that local tournaments have been playing because it stops that spam. So that's what it is. I don't think the scenario affects either team more than the other, so it's going to be a pretty balanced game going into this one. And for those of you who care, this is how deployment goes down. And yeah, we're in for a good game, so hope you enjoy it. So this is the board after deployment, and I actually forgot to take the photo. So this is the board after the Abyssals have taken their first turn movement then. But if I just quickly go through the terrain, we have a big woods block here. We have impassable height 4 here. We have another big woods there, a height 2 hill here. A big bit of difficult terrain there, and then building here, here, and then an obstacle there. So fairly decent terrain, but a lot of open space in the middle of the board in this area here. And if I just go through my deployment, my Crudge on a Wing Slasher, this guy here, ideally I would have wanted him on the right hand flank. That's what I was going to do. Anyway, if I just get rid of all this, it looks a bit clear. I was going to play him on the right hand flank, but after he put down his 2 Efreets, one there and one there, and then he's also got a troop of shooters here. I think those are called Fleshlings, I think. I really want my flyer to be hunting down those 2 Efreets because I know they are seriously dangerous. So if I put my flying threat on the left-hand flank, that makes his choices with movement a lot more difficult with his Efreets. So I've basically massively overloaded my left-hand flank because I've got my chariot there, my regiment of Gore Riders there, and my Crutcher there. Yeah, which means that my right-hand flank is looking really weak, and my inspiring Godspeaker there is split between my horde and my trolls. It's not ideal, but I changed my mind with my flyer. So that's basically how deployment went down. I assumed he'd put his Efreets here, like in the woods, because that's very central to the board. He's got a lot of shooting options to take out my chaff and my trolls. And obviously it means that anytime they get charged, they're hindered, so it just makes them a lot more tricky to deal with. So that's what I thought he's going to do, but when he put them down on his right flank, it meant I had to overload my left. So that is how deployment has gone. And that is what the movement is looking like at the end of the Abyssal turn 1. Fairly aggressive. Everything's moved up. Obviously no shooting for the Abyssals in first turn because their shooting is very short range. So that is the end of Abyssal's turn 1. Yeah, and this is just some shots at the end of the movement. As you can see, pretty much everything moved up mostly as far as it will go. That is the right hand flank. And that is the gargoyles that have flown over the top of that building. And I think they would have pivoted more, but because of where they were, that is the most they could pivot, because obviously the building was stopping them. So this is the board after Orc's first turn of movement, and I'm pressing up with pretty much everything almost as far as it'll go, so there will definitely be some charges for the Abyssals to make next turn. On that left flank, I've pushed everything up. Because he's got those tortured souls, you know, which have the flying range, and I've only got cavalry for the most part, so he outranges me anyway. So he's gonna get the charge on me. It's not a lot I can do there. So I'm okay with that though. So I've got my war drum. I don't know whether you can see, but he's in the woods here anyway. So with my Gore Riders, they've got a drum, they've got inspiring. Anything he charges should be able to hold, basically. And then I've kept my unit of Gore Riders in the woods, the ones with Pathfinder, so that if he shoots at them, they get cover. I'm a bit worried about this unit of Great Axes here, though, because I couldn't give them cover, but they're going to get shot. So, you know, at least I've got inspiring there. And then, yeah, just pushed up with everything. My Godspeaker on the right-hand flank. Now, I've got the Veil of Shadows, so I could give something stealthy, but I want to take out those gargoyles. He's only got, obviously, his Godspeaker Fireball, which is 10 because of the Horde, and those unit of gargoyles are defense 3, so I think I'll have a crack at those. Unfortunately, I don't get great dice. I only put 2 wounds on them, but I do manage to waver them. So that is the end of Orc's turn 1. So this is the board after Abyssal's movement turn 2, and if we go from the right then, the Horde of Larvae have charged into the front of that unit, that regiment of Orclings there, and the Hellhounds, they were about here, and they've got that massive movement, they've charged into the front of those Orclings there. Everything else behind has moved up. Now, I seem to remember from playing the game that the Cav could have charged my axes there. I think they could have. I think that was a charge that he missed that I was worried about. But when he charged the larvae in, if he'd done the cav first, he could have got a corner charge. I can't remember. Maybe he was out of range. Maybe he just missed it. But whatever. If he just missed it, that was just lucky on my behalf, I guess. And then on the left-hand flank, the Tortured Souls there, they've gone into the front of my my war boss on chariot. Sorry, my Crudger on chariot. And then all his shooting has moved up to make some shooting attacks. There's Cronius there, and there's his 2 Afrits. But that's about it for the movement. Yeah, that's the larvae charge. And then the Gargoyles regen a wound here. They were wavered, so they can't do anything. To be honest, I forgot they had regen. I probably wouldn't have bothered shooting at them with my my Godspeak if I'd known they had regen 3. I just forgot. Whatever. So they get 1 wound back. And the Tortured Souls, they go into the front of my Crudger on chariot. There they are there. And yeah, shooting-wise, he puts 12 wounds on that regiment of Great Axes. I can't remember whether this was Cronius or the Afrits, but basically it's all fireball, and it's all with piercing. It's much the same. And then what else? 1 wound onto the Gore Riders. They had cover. And then also 2 wounds onto that War Drum there. Again, this had cover. I can't remember where his shooting came from. I think those guys there, those are the Flame Bearers. I think they shot at the drum, and the Afrit shot at the Gore Riders. But anyway, yeah, just the wavering on that unit of Great Axes, which I'm pretty lucky to get away with. If that was me, I would have done more than 12 just to guarantee, instead of putting the other shooting onto those units there. So I expected them to just be deleted, if I'm honest. But anyway, there's just wavering, and then combat-wise, the Hellhounds only do 5 wounds to that regiment of Orklings, and they have a drum behind them, so they're not even wavered, which is lucky. And then the Larvae only do 4 wounds to that regiment of Orklings, because I cast the Great Hand of Gork spell to aid me during their turn. And then the Tortured Souls, they only do 7 wounds to my Crudger on a chariot, and he's fine. I think he gets wavered, but he has Fury. I think that's what happened, and that is pretty much the end of the Abyssal's turn 2. And this is the board after I make all my charges, etc. So on the right hand flank, the axes have gone into the front of the larvae. I know that is a pretty shit thing to do, but my hands are tied because obviously they got in snare, and I'm hitting that obstacle, so I'm hindered twice over. I'm hitting on 6s there. And then the Orklings have countercharge. The Godspeaker, I just move up to keep everything within inspiring range. And then in the middle, the Trolls have gone into the Hellhounds, and the Orklings have recharged into the Hellhounds. I'm a bit crushed up in the middle, so I can't really get that many effective charges. This isn't ideal for me, these Trolls here, because obviously when I'm going to break that chaff, which I will, I'm just leaving them exposed to just a world of hurt. But, you know, whatever. It is what it is. And then on the left-hand flank, can't do much with my Great Axes here. Obviously they're wavered. So the Crudger on the Wing Slasher, he's gone into the front of that little troop of Flame Bearers. The Gore Riders that were in the woods have gone into the front of the Imps here. The Drum was in the woods, so is hindered, so unfortunately he can't move up to give support to any of those units there, so he just stays in the middle giving his rallying. And then on the left hand side, the Crudger on a chariot, he countercharges because of his Fury, and then the Gore Riders go into the front of those as well there. I'm pretty sure that is enough to take them off the board because they're out of inspiring range. I'm hoping anyway, because I want those units definitely available in turn 3. I would have charged a Afrit to my Slasher if I could have, obviously, but he positioned them in a way I couldn't. So those are the charges I've made. Right, so in the combat phase, yeah, I do 12 wounds to that unit of Tortured Souls, which is nice. I get my averages, and I'm pretty sure they are routed. They are definitely routed. Crudger on a Wing Slasher does not do well. That's a little troop of Defense 3 Flame Bearers. He shits the bed. He does 4 wounds from his 10 attacks and bounces. Extremely disappointing from this guy on his first ever charge. That's 300 points. Just bounced from a little troop of shooting. Never mind, he's gone back. Yeah, that's him after he's gone back. The Gore Riders, they do a pretty respectable 8 wounds here. Not bad at all. I will definitely take that from a cavalry charge. And they get a waver. But obviously the Forces of the Abyss have a Fury as an army special rule, so that wavering doesn't affect them too much, and the Gore Riders bounce back. In the middle here, yeah, 12 wounds onto that troop of horsemen. Sorry, hellhounds, and they are routed. And then I get 7 wounds onto the larvae. I think the Orclings just spike really well on their damage here because they're hitting on 5s, but they get the vicious from the from their hits, and obviously the axes don't do much. They were hitting on 6s there, so 7 wounds here. I'll take 7 wounds. I've got to get some wounds on. Oops, sorry. I've got to get some wounds onto that larvae anyway because they're just a massive tar pit. So the sooner I get them off the board, the better. They're a great unit, by the way, that ensnare with defense 4. When you're coming up against things like orcs, they can really, really hold up units. I think they're great. And then, yeah, so that is the board after my turn. So not exactly a great start. I think well, I don't know. I've routed his hellhounds, and I've routed a whole horde of tortured souls. So not a bad start, and I'm okay. Oh, I should mention here in the middle, I managed to move up with my Orclings. I roll a 5 after the combat to get them right up into the face of that cavalry, so that is lucky, because they were like here. If I had rolled like a 1, he would have been able to get the double charge onto the trolls, but I'm lucky. I roll a 5, which means I'm able to chaff up that cav. So that has definitely saved me. And also, with my God Speaker here, I forgot to say, I got some more fireball onto his gargoyles, but I only get 1 wound, and I don't even waver them. So that's really disappointing, because this guy has now done fireball 20 onto a defense 3 troop and only managed 3 wounds total out of it. So really, really poor dice there on my behalf, and that is pretty much the end of my turn. So Abyssal's turn 3 then, and this is the board after they've made a couple of charges. The larvae have elected to countercharge into the axes, and then those oh, I forget what they're called now. It'll come to me later. Anyway, that's a flank charge on the Orclings because it was their flank arc, so that's why he's done that. The gargoyles have regened a wound, and they've flown over to the middle of the board. Now, I think that is a mistake. I definitely would have gone into the rear of those axes. I just think if you've got a unit like that, if you're going to pass up rear charges, then what are you doing? Like, you've got them on the flank to make flanking charges like that. Don't get me wrong, they're gargoyles, so they're not super killy. They haven't got any crushing or anything like that. But if you're going to pass up on rear charges, what's the point? So yeah, so what we did, we talked about it with my God Speaker here. If he'd gone into him, he wouldn't have got the overrun onto the axes because of the way his base was angled. He would have gone into the front and then overrun to like here. So that was never an option, but these guys were an option, which he didn't take. I don't know why. I think he just wanted to maybe threaten my drums there and stuff with a bit lower defense, because obviously they're going to struggle. The gargoyle's going to struggle to put wounds on the defense 5 unit. I don't know. To me, that's a mistake, but whatever. The knights in the middle, they've elected to back up because they had no decent charges. It seemed he didn't want to go into the front of this unit there because it seemed pointless. They were dead anyway, and he couldn't make that charge there because they couldn't get the pivot off and then close the door. It couldn't work. I know it looks on camera like it should have, but in real life it couldn't. And then on so that's charges the center. The left hand flank, his regiment of tortured souls, that's a flank charge on my Crudger on a winged slasher, unfortunately. So that's a pretty decent charge for them. Unfortunately for me, there's the gargoyles regening their wounds. And then what else has happened? Yeah, Cronius has moved over into the middle, and then he begins his shooting phase. So his Efreet here, this is the one with piercing, manages to put 4 wounds onto my Crudger on a chariot, which is a little dangerous for me. I don't really want this guy gone already because he is one of my inspiring presences, so we'll see what happens there. Cronius puts 3 wounds onto the regiment of Great Axes in the middle. They had cover, so that's why it's not a huge amount of wounds. And then, yeah, the Efreet rolls as double 1s here. I get really lucky. I didn't want this guy going, so he puts 4 wounds and then double 1s it. So he's not even wavered. He's free to make some charges next turn. That is a very good thing for me. The other Efreet puts, I think it was 1 wound onto the unit of Great Axes in the middle, but that's all they needed. They were very heavily wounded, and he removes them from the board. So they're gone. Cronius gets a lot of luck here. He only does 3 wounds, but he rolls his double 6s to waver, so that's an absolute bummer for me. So this regiment of Great Axes won't be doing anything next turn. That's very frustrating. Yeah, we just double once this. They were... the Orclins were never going to survive that. And then he gets another bit of luck here as well, because his imps, they go back into the front of my Gore Riders. These guys were wounding on 5s and then 5s. He gets 4 wounds and then wavers them with a 9. That's awesome. Just, yeah, that is Gore Riders. You know, that 1350 nerve is just so low that if you can't get a war drum with them, that can happen. They can get countercharged by a unit of like 80 point chaff and get wavered. Yeah, bummer for me. So, but then the Tortured Souls absolutely shit the bed. Flank charge onto my Crudger, and he only does 2 wounds, which is just absolutely rubbish. They hit on 4s, these guys, so that's what happens when you've got flying infantry that hit on 4s. Sometimes they can just do that badly. And then his larvae only put 1 wound onto my regiment of axes, which again is really poor. Not that larvae are offensively devastating or anything, but you would have wanted more than that. And that is the end of the board for Abyssal's turn 3. So, not a great turn in terms of combats. He would have loved to get this Crudger off the board, but then again, he wavers the Gore Riders and he wavers the Great Axes, so you can't really ask for more than that. A bit of lucky dice there, and that is the board at the end of Abyssal's turn 3. Orc turn 4, and these are the charges I decided to make. So on the right hand flank, the axes have gone into the front of the larvae, and the Orclins get the flank, so that should help, because the flank doesn't mean they get their ensnare. The Goldspeaker's gone over to the middle, and he casts Stealthy on this unit of Great Axes here. So hopefully they won't take too much damage shooting next turn. On the left hand side, if I got a yeah, that's the Stealthy shot. Yeah, my Crudger on a Chariot manages to get the charge in the Efreet because of his nimble, and the Gore Riders go into the front of that unit of Tortured Souls. Ooh, combat-wise, I get quite lucky here because I'm hitting on 5s across the board, and I do manage to put 13 wounds onto that horde of larvae, and I managed to rout them and get them off the board. This is decent because I don't want these units held up for any longer. That flank charge from the Orclins really helped. I think they put something like an extra 6 wounds or something. They did really well. And yeah, the Trolls don't do well on the charge into the lower Abyssals. They only do 5 wounds, and those lower Abyssals have regen as well, so they'll probably regen a couple of those back, so that's fairly poor from the Trolls. My Crudger on the Wing Slasher, he does 10 wounds from 10 attacks and then rolls double 1s and bounces from that troop again. So that sucks. I want this guy. Yeah, obviously he's super. If he manages to make some reform from this charge, he's going to be awesome, but you know, whatever. He's tied up. It is what it is. My Crudger on a Chariot manages to kill the Efreet and then overrun. He doesn't roll enough to overrun into the imps, but at least the Efreet is dead. That is really good for me. I don't want those Efreets alive going into late game. That would absolutely suck. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for me. That's the board at the end of the Orcs' turn. So at least the Efreet is dead, and oh no, I forgot to mention those Gore Riders there. They put 9 wounds onto that regiment of Tortured Souls. They don't manage to kill them, but 9 wounds is a really good start, and it strips their Thunderous, and it strips their Flying, so that's fairly decent. This unit couldn't do much at all, obviously. And that is the board at the end of my turn. It's worth pointing out here that, see this combat there? Right, this is just something that you don't really notice when you're playing the game, but in hindsight, remember when he reformed this unit of lower Abyssals? If he'd reformed them in a way that they were more angled this way, then when the Trolls charged them and bounced, that was a flank charge onto the Trolls from his cav. If I go back to this photo here, yeah, that's how he reformed them. If he'd reformed them at more of an angle, then it sets up the flank charge for his Trolls, and that is just those small things that are a difference between, you know, being a good player and being an absolutely great player. Something to bear in mind for those of you who are watching looking for some tactics. But that is the end of my turn. So Abyssal's turn 4, and this is the board after his charges. So the double charges in the center of the board into the front of those trolls. I really hope that they can hold up. His gargoyles have gone into the front of my regiment of great axes, and then on the left hand side here, just counter charges across the board. Really, the tortured souls have gone back into the gore riders, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's a photo of the, oh no, sorry, the shooting. Cronius decides to shoot at this war drum here to try and take the rallying away from the trolls, which is a good idea. But unfortunately, because of the cover, he only gets 3 wounds on that war drum, and it's totally fine. He doesn't even waver it. Not that he could have wavered it because it's fearless, obviously. But it stays alive because of the inspiring, so those trolls are getting their rallying. And then on his right-hand flank, the Efreet turns around and puts just a ton of wounds onto that Crudger on a chariot, and he is routed. So that's unfortunate. I think this guy's done okay. And yeah, those little flame bearers, they try to go back into the Crudger to try and take his flying away from him, but they don't. They don't manage to put a single wound on him, so they just bounce back. And the Tortured Souls do absolutely crap as well here. They've lost their Thunderous, but still they don't put a single wound onto that regiment of Gore Riders, so they don't even take the Gore Riders Thunderous. So unfortunately for them, the Imps, they do okay actually. They put another 2 wounds onto this unit of Gore Riders, but he doesn't get the lucky nerve roll to waver them. And he would have only needed a, what is it? He would have only needed a 7 to waver them again. So that's the wavering token from last turn. They're not actually wavered. The Gargoyles, they do okay. They put 3 wounds onto this regiment of Great Axes, and they do waver them. So they bounce back. That's really frustrating. These guys have been wavered twice already. And this is the break he doesn't get. So with those 2 front charges from his Cav with Pathfinder and his Horde of Lower Abyssals, he only manages to put 11 wounds on those trolls, which is not great dice. And obviously with them having Rally into and Inspiring, he just bounces back. So that is unfortunate. He would have obviously loved to take those trolls away, and that opens up the whole middle of the board for him. So yeah, that is not a good break for the Abyssals, but that is what I put my trolls in my list to do. Their defense 5, and obviously if you can get the rallying 2 behind them, they become 16-19, which means they are tough and with regen as well. So that is the end of Abyssals turn 4. Okay, Orc turn 4, and these are the charges I declare to make. Yeah, luckily enough, my trolls passed their headstrong from their Dwarven Ale, and I countercharge into the cavalry. And then I also put my Orclings in as well. I was out of range with my Horde of Axes, so I just moved them up and pivot them. They'll be in charge range next turn, but unfortunately I wasn't in range this turn. In the shooting phase, my Godspeaker manages to put 3 wounds on those gargoyles. I think they'd regen a couple back, but anyway, put them up to 3, and then I managed to roll an 11 for the nerve roll and rout them because they were out of inspiring range. So he's done really crap with his fireballs, but then this turn he just spikes super hard with that nerve roll and removes them from the board. So that's a definite bonus. And then on the left-hand flank, yeah, that's a nerve roll for the gargoyles. On the left-hand flank, my Crudger goes back into that troop of flesh or flame bearers and does manage to rout them this turn. I was very close to rolling double ones again though. So he routs them and then makes a reform. The Gore Riders put 6 wounds onto that troop, onto that regiment of imps, and do manage to rout them despite them having inspiring. So they're free to make their reforms again, and then these Gore Riders put another load of wounds onto that regiment of Tortured Souls and rout them as well. So the left flank is looking good, but not so good in the middle. My trolls just don't do well against their cav, and I only put 4 wounds on his regiment of Abyssal Horsemen, which is not great, really. But, you know, whatever. I'm just glad the trolls are even there, to be honest, so I will definitely take that as a win. And this is the board after Orc turn 4, and as you can see, the entire Abyssal right-hand flank has just utterly collapsed. So I've got 2 regiments of Gore Riders and my Flyer all there, and the Abyssals are absolutely surrounded here. It's not looking great for them. But we'll see if they can make a bit of a comeback in turn 5. So for the abyssals then, let's have a look. Yeah, so the horde of lower abyssals, they go into the flank of those trolls because that's the way the unit leader points work out. Cronius just turns around to do some breath attacks, and then his Efreet is just about here, I could think, behind the Crudger, and his Cav go into the front of those Orclings. And then shooting wise, yeah, Cronius puts a load of damage onto that already wounded regiment of Gore Riders and routs them, and then the Efreet puts a load of wounds onto the drum that was already wounded and routs that as well. And then the the flank charge from the lower bristles puts those trolls up to 20 wounds and then routs them as well. So far so good, but then not so great for his Cav, who do not do hardly any wounds. He puts those Orclings up to 5. They're on 1 already, I think, so he only does 4 wounds, which is just crap. And then insult to injury, he double ones it as well. Now, it wasn't a true double ones because I think because he rolled so bad, he needed to roll like 9 twice to rout them because of the rallying 2 and the inspiring. But you know, it just goes to show he could have put 10 wounds on them and he would have double wounded anyway. So these Cav have had not a great day. Their damage output has been really poor, and that is the end of Abyssal's turn 5. So that is what the board is looking like after all his reforms. And Cronius is there on his own. And yeah, so that I think he really needed a break with that Cav because it's not looking good for the Abyssals here, and unfortunately he just gets the cheeky double ones again. So that's the end of Abyssal's turn 5. Turn 5 for the Orcs then, and here are my charges. Now unfortunately on the left hand flank, because the way Cronius is there and this piece of blocking terrain, I couldn't put my Gore Riders and my Crudger into him. The bases wouldn't fit and they can't cross over on the charge, so I had to pick one to put in, so I chose the Gore Riders, and that means my Crudger is just hanging out here looking to get some charges maybe next turn. The Great Axes here have gone into the front of the lower Abyssals. And then my Axe Regiment has charged into the flank of his Cav, but that is a hindered charge, obviously. What else has happened? Oh, my God Speaker has cast Stealthy onto my Gore Riders, because when they inevitably bounce off the front of Cronius and don't disorder him, because he cannot be disordered, they're going to get shot by this Efreet and that, so I put Stealthy on them. And that's basically it, really. Let's get on to combat. See, yeah, so the Axes, despite being hindered, I put 10 wounds onto this regiment of Cav because they were already on 4, but which isn't great, but I do manage to rout them. So they are gone, and then the Great Axes put the lower Abyssals up to 11 wounds because they've been regenerating a couple of wounds back throughout the game, so they are only sitting on 11. I bounce off them. The Gore Riders do 6 wounds onto Cronius, which is not that bad, actually, because he's defense 5, so that's okay. And then they bounce back, and yeah, that's basically the end of my turn. So literally nothing gone because because of the regen and stuff. Yeah, so not a great turn 5 for the Orcs, but that's basically what the board is looking like after all my reforms. So let's see what the Abyssals can do in their potentially last turn of the game. So between Cronius and the Efreet then, they managed to put 6 wounds onto that regiment of Gore Riders with Stealthy from Veil of Shadows really just absolutely saving them there and making them both of them hit on 5s. They still put 6 wounds and they waver them. So not too bad. Bit of a bonus. And then the Horde of lower Abyssals, they regen a couple of wounds. They think they were on 11, right? And they regen to 8. And then they get Bane Chant as well. They go into the front of the Gore Axes and rout them. So not too shabby a turn, managing to get the rout on the unit and a waver onto the Cav, and that is the end of Forces of the Abyss turn 6, and this is what the board is looking like after all their reforms. So let's see how the Orcs can do in what is their turn 6. So for the Orcs turn 6 then, I make all my charges. My Axe is going to the front of his Horde. I move my Godspeaker up to the back of the table to try and score points. He's a monster, so they can score points Sorry, war drum. I wore my war drum to try and score the points. And then my god speaker, after doing pretty poor all game, I decided just to have a pop at his little BSB there with loot. And I just spiked super hard here. And I put 6 wounds on him and remove him from the board. So I get really lucky there. My Crudge on a Wing Slasher goes into the flank of Cronius, because he couldn't reform with the Gore Riders there. The Gore Riders have turned around, because obviously they were wavered, they couldn't do anything, and then my Crudge puts Cronius up to 16 wounds. He does 10 damage here, and Cronius is routed. Yep, he's gone. But the axes and the goblins, sorry, the Orclings, they don't do that well, because both these charges are hindered, so they only put his horde up to 13. I think they were on 8, so they did really poor, actually, really poor here, but... And then fluff the nerve roll for a 3 as well, so they're still on the board at the end of the game. I really like this unit of Lower Abyssals. I just think having that nerve of 21, 23, and then the regen, they are really difficult to get off the board, you know? They really are. Because what have they regen? Like 6 wounds this game? Something like that? 6, 8 wounds? Which means their nerve is actually more like 30, you know? Rather than 23. They're really tough to get off the board. I like that unit there a lot. Yeah, so basically we roll for another turn, we don't get one, so that is what the board is looking like at the end of the game. Scenario-wise as well, it's a solid win for the Orcs. I think these two hordes cancel each other out, so I score this section of the table, and maybe that one as well for 3 points, and then maybe this one here for 4. So it's about 4-0 to the Orcs. So that's it, and it's a victory of the Orcs. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. I know I certainly did. I'm loving the Orcs at the moment, I've got to be honest. They're not the most diverse list, pretty predictable, pretty one-dimensional. I tend to write very infantry-heavy lists, because I think that's where the strengths of the Orcs really lie. You don't really have much access to any range, you know, not shooting, no fast cav, nothing like that. So just play to their strengths, and well, I do anyway, and I play very infantry-heavy lists, and I try and get the rallying from the drums and stuff. But, you know, you got to love the green tide, haven't you? Both Orcs and Goblins. Who doesn't love the green tide? Yeah, so anyway, that's it. I hope you guys are pumped for the release of Clash of Kings 2019 in a few weeks, and I'll catch you on the next one.